Paul, I will get us started, and just by a quick introduction about some of the things that we've been dealing with at Whistleblowers of America. I started to mention earlier that we have been very engaged in the VA sexual harassment of employees inside the office of what is their Human Resources and Diversity Inclusion. And we had senior officials harassing junior female staff, and it was pretty explicit. Some of it was pretty vulgar. And now the VA has proposed termination for some of the harassers, as well as for some of the other senior leaders, but they're also proposing termination for one of the women who was involved in trying to help the whistleblowers figure out what to do. And so we're really running a campaign that we've got hashtag Save Grace as a way of trying to get this one whistleblower. We still have a chance, and we're hoping that we have opportunity to be heard. NBC has covered it. Congress has had hearings on it, and we're really hoping that we can save Grace, that we're not too late in the process to help her be able to continue in her career. So that has been kind of the backdrop for this whole month. And then last week, I was at the UN Status on Women's meeting. We had some sessions mostly with nurses, and I got a chance to talk a little bit about whistleblower retaliation. Last December, or this past December, the UN passed two interesting resolutions. One that they call the Resolution on Protecting Reporting Persons, aka whistleblowers. And that resolution has been something that I think, or I hope, will help us pole vault some of our other issues into action here in the US, but around the world. The second resolution that I'm very excited about is a resolution they called social impact, what they would not call gender equity. But it really is about women and girls having access to justice systems, to healthcare systems, to governments, to elections, to banking. I think we recently celebrated in this country in the anniversary of women being able to have credit cards and bank accounts in their own name. And as we know, there are still countries in the world where women are not people in that regard in their own right, and they are very dependent upon their male relatives to allow them to have that level of freedom. So as I get ready to sort of introduce our two discussants tonight, I think in our worlds, and when we think about women in leadership positions and what that can mean, we have some opportunity to really set the stage and change some of these dichotomies where women of mind, especially women of color, are left out of the conversation. So I'm very hopeful that we can have a good discussion tonight. The chat is open. I see more people are joining. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you are, what you're thinking, what you need. If you have any questions, we're gonna get started. I think I'm gonna start with Jeannie, who has her own interesting and compelling stories to tell, lots of experience. And then I think we're lucky to have Renee here, who is an attorney in a large enough law firm in DC. And there aren't that many female attorneys in this world that I've come across. you're probably one of two that are two or three that I can think of. So I'm going to let Jeannie introduce herself, her background, and then, we'll give each of them about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll start to open up discussion. So Jeannie, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So first of all, I'm Janine Moss. I'm so happy to join you guys all today. And my background, I don't know whether you recognize it or not, if you're from the Bay Area, this is the Ferry Building. We have a workspace in the Ferry Building for OutFront Solutions. And we have been working remotely. My business partner and I have been partners for over 20 years, and we have never lived in the same town. So I have a very long history. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a branding and marketing person and the co-founder of OutFront Solutions, and that's what we do. We work for a lot of tech companies, but we've also worked for governments and a lot for nonprofits. I handled the global communications program for the September 11th Fund, and I met Jackie at the Department of Defense when I was there as a political appointee, and Jackie was there as a mover and shaker. And we had something in common, which is that if we see something, we say something, right? Jackie, we have always been that way. And I think we recognized each other at that time. You were working on VA, some of the suicide prevention, some of the healthcare issues. And, we just wanted to do whatever we could to make things better. And that's pretty much the watchword of my career. And so I started my career, I started as an entrepreneur in college, starting my first tech-related horse trading firm. And I realized that I really liked advertising and marketing. So I sold all my worldly possessions and I moved to New York City and I got a job on Madison Avenue. And the job I got on Madison Avenue was in new product development. And to do that, you travel all over the country, come up with a million ideas, you test them with people around the world, around the country at the time. And we were flying everywhere and there was nothing for women. That we would go to these hotels and they would have these dark lobby bars and steak houses, and you could use the gym between the hours of 10 and 4. Hello, and no skirt hangers. And I was just incensed that they on airplanes, by the way. And we flew first class. This was my first experience and only joyful experience of flying first class. But they would hand me a rose and they would hand a bottle of wine to the dude who was sitting next to me. And it was like, wait a second here. I need 2 bottles of wine, not just one. So I was really mad. So I looked into how many women were traveling. I found out we were 30% of the market. And I said, this is ridiculous. We're just growing here. And so I started the first newsletter for female business travelers. And what was really great about that is it galvanized not only women, so I got a lot of subscribers and it was all done through publicity, but also the airlines and the hotels started hiring me to help them become more female-centric. So the reason I tell you this story is that's one of my experiences. I also created the first luxury, high-style accessories to carry cannabis. They were odor-proof accessories back in the day for women because nobody knew women were there in the cannabis industry, and that made me mad. So my career is to some extent defined by seeing things, getting mad about them, and doing something about them. And I hope that you will all join us in this effort. I hope we inspire you to do more things to change the game for women.
Yay.
So do you want to?
Thank you. Yep. I don't mind. I was having trouble getting my mic to go back on. Okay. So I'm going to kick this over to Renee to introduce herself.
Great. Well, I really appreciate that people joined at 7 o'clock in the evening. As I was saying to Paul, this is my time when I pop open a bottle of wine and I put on my big baggy clothes and nobody sees me. But here I am and here you all are. So I'm impressed. And I'm sure you've all had busy days. So I'm here at my home in Washington, D.C., where I have lived since I graduated from law school. And I went to Georgetown. I don't know I went to law school with a Mary Baker. I don't know if it's the same Mary Baker who is on here, but that would be very funny because Mary was one of my very good friends in law school. But as happens to many of us, you graduate from college, law school, people go different places and you don't see folks again. But anyway, Mary Baker, that name just brought a smile to my face thinking about Mary Baker from Georgetown Law School, where I graduated. So
well, Baker would make you smile too if you got to know her.
Oh, look at, she said, nope, just a retired cop. Well, I guess there's probably a lot of Mary Bakers out there. So yeah, I mean, I've been in, like I said, I've been in Washington, D.C. since I graduated, after 26 years in government, mostly at the Department of Justice here in Washington. I handled whistleblower cases. It's what I did my whole career, but very, very particular types of cases. So as Jackie knows, and maybe some of you know about the False Claims Act, and maybe none of you know about the False Claims Act. And I certainly didn't know about it when I first started practicing law, never heard of it. Had no idea what a successful, powerful law it is. But the False Claims Act is a law that helps the Department of Justice and all the federal agencies recover misspent money under government contracts and programs, like the important programs like the Medicare program, the TRICARE healthcare program, and hundreds of other government-funded programs, grants, and contracts. And the Department of Justice section called Civil Frauds that enforces the False Claims Act and helps these agencies' programs get their money back when they're defrauded by mostly big companies. It's a huge office, probably, close to 200 people work there. Not all lawyers, but most of them lawyers and support staff like accountants and investigators and data analysts and so forth. And so after leaving government for 26 years, working with the whistleblowers who brought those cases under the False Claims Act, because the False Claims Act is only powerful and successful because private individuals, mostly employees of companies, but you don't have to be an employee, and it's not 100% employees, speak up, raise their hand, report fraud against government programs, and then become what's called a key tam relator or a whistleblower, and are entitled to a reward of the government's recovery of money of the defrauded program. So after working on the DOJ side, hand in glove with the private counsel who would bring their whistleblower clients to me, I decided, me and another woman, another female attorney from my office, we decided that together we wanted to leave DOJ and represent the private whistleblowers, bringing those clients to the Department of Justice and helping the Department of Justice with those cases, those investigations and litigations. So False Claims Act is a very powerful public-private partnership between private individuals and their counsel and the government to allow, important programs, again, to be recovered, money to be recovered when they are defrauded. So it's been really my life's work. And I always tell people who call me up, I speak to lots of folks who are thinking about going to law school, young people. And I always tell them, for me, it's been a calling, being an attorney. I've loved every minute of it. I still love it. I won't give it up. I don't know that, I have no retirement in sight. It's a calling for me, and I love what I do. And I think that's sort of like my important message, I guess, for this call, that I think it would be all helpful for us to just hear from everybody, is, to me, there is safety in numbers, particularly for women. So, a common sort of theme or thought that I've had my whole career is stronger together, because I think women are stronger together, and we outnumber men all the time, whether it's in the workforce or in the population.
Do we outnumber the men in these cases? I mean, how many of your clients would you say are women? How many are men?
I looked up, you asked me to look for data, and I did. And there is a report from Harvard business school. Now it's old now, and they looked at all whistleblower false claims act qui tam cases that were filed between 1994 and 2012. So it's a good data set, but it's old. And between that time period, 41% of all former employee whistleblower lawsuits were brought by women. Women employees brought, whistleblower false claims act whistleblower lawsuits against their employers. And 30% settled suits brought by their former employee, those were settled. So 30% of those got settled. So 41% were filed and 27 to 30% were settled. And on average, women former employees had an average settlement of $14 million in their whistleblower lawsuits. And overall, during that time period, again, we're talking just 94 to 2012. So if we bring this number to the present, I don't know what that would look like, but lawsuits brought by female former employees generated $4.4 billion in total settlements for the United States, some percentage of which, they would have received a recovery of. So they're not putting that amount in their pocket. They're putting that amount back into the programs that were defrauded, and they're getting a percentage of that, somewhere between 15 and 30%. So, that data wasn't broken down, but I will say that we have, at least half of our clients that we end up taking are women. And maybe, if I looked at my own data, I might say that increasingly women, more and more women are the client that are bringing the lawsuits. And even in certain types of areas like healthcare fraud have been historically women. So certain types of healthcare fraud cases, you will see large numbers, nurses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, are big whistleblowers in certain, types of healthcare cases. So you do see a lot of women because you see women in the healthcare field more than in helping professions in the healthcare field. Yeah, so I think women are represented. I think it is fair to say women are well represented without me having like current data, break it down over all years from 1986 to the present. But I'm not seeing a lack of women stepping up and wanting to be whistleblowers in this space.
No, so that's actually great in some ways for me to hear that we have women that are able to access justice in a way that maybe they weren't able to years ago, and that they are feeling compelled, and that they have recourse, that they're able to find law firms that will represent them and assist in those kinds of cases. We've talked about propensity between men and women to act, and have wondered, and I don't have the answer to this, we've wondered about the differences in how or what motivates men and women to become whistleblowers, to act, to do what Jeannie did. Is if you see something wrong, do you say something about it? And how involved do you get? Janine, did you ever get your second bottle of wine?
Yeah, we got equality in the air in that sense. But I wanted to ask this question because I've kind of, it's empirical, but women, it seems to me that women in the millennial and Gen Z generations are less likely to put up with stuff like sexual harassment than people in my generation. And I'll give you an example of this. I was at my niece's for the holidays, and there was a drunk dude there, right? And he was misbehaving, and he was coming and being inappropriate. And I said, just sit down over there. We're not interested in what you're doing. Just sit down, right? And my niece stepped up, and she's Gen X. And she said, and he kept persisting. And she said, no, you stop this and you shouldn't do it. And he was persisting. And my daughter, who's a millennial, she said, this is bullshit. What are you two even talking to this dude for? He needs to get kicked the hell out of this room. Why are we even dealing with this? And I went, oh, you're right. right? We're trying to calm it. We're trying to make it okay. He can stay. It's, his behavior's being, and she's like, no. And she just stalked right out of there. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to take a page out of her book. I've seen that play out in other ways. And Renee, do you see is there an increase of the number of women who are unwilling to put up with sexual harassment in the way that we were willing? We didn't know, right? And I can give you a million examples of where I was and that stuff happened. And I was just like, oh no, just must manage this. Have you seen an increase in younger women stepping up and saying, no, this is not acceptable?
Oh, I think the Me Too movement has been a huge game changer. Absolutely. And because now it's more socially acceptable to do what you just said, Judy. It is
True.
more acceptable to do that. And you will have people rally behind you, just as you both did, right? When she, said, no, let's get rid of him. So there's no question that my husband says this all the time to me. Always reading the articles about women not taking it anymore when it comes to sexual harassment. And he reminds me all the time, it's attributable to the Me Too movement. And it was a game changer, I think, because the progress on that point was way too slow. But then I think, we'll have to see over time where we are, but I think it abruptly changed things for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And now people are willing to call out wrongdoers of sexual harassment. So I think that is true. Now, whether it's changed the behavior of sexual harassers, I can't speak to that at all. And I don't know, but it has made people less uncomfortable about speaking out about it, and just calling the wrongdoer, right? Before, you were like embarrassed. The whole situation is embarrassing. Why are you embarrassed? Well, you are, for some reason, right? Even though you're not, you're the victim. But that's how people felt. I don't think people, I think it's been super helpful. I think it's, changed things for a lot of people, and we need to keep up that momentum. I think that's sort of my feeling about it. Now, I do represent people who have been retaliated against as part of the False Claims Act QTAM cases, but very few, if any, of my cases involve sexual harassment allegations.
So I was just going to say, I was just surprised at what I was willing to accept in juxtaposition to my daughter. And I know about this, and I've been I've been helping women's advancement since the dawn of time, and I still didn't recognize in myself what I was willing to accept. It was a big opener.
Yeah. No, so I agree. Being of the same generation, I think there's this moment of where you're trained to go along and get along. And we see that a lot, especially in the military and government cultures, where if you want a seat at the table, you have to do your best to fit in.
Right.
And I think those ideas that you shouldn't say anything, and the what you say, when you say it, how you say it. And then, of course, we've seen a lot with military female veterans who have come forward and have talked about military sexual trauma. And I think the I Am Vanessa is the other hashtag I think of a lot, with Vanessa Gillum, who tried to report sexual harassment to her chain of command. They acted like they didn't believe her. And then she ends up dead, murdered. Her perpetrator kills himself. I mean, that's not a good outcome either. And we are still, I think, struggling with the he said, she said mentality, and the what constitutes evidence in these cases, and how you bring them forth, and how you have a plan and have a strategy and be mindful. I mean, it puts the burden back on the victim, or the woman who's trying to, plug up a hole in the dike, so to speak. And you become, we talk about David versus Goliath. In this case, what was the expression about Ginger Rogers in high heels and backwards? I think women still have so much more to prove in the workplace. And I think another part of the problem is the lack of women in leadership roles. I know, so I've talked to Mary Baker before. I know she's a retired police officer. How many female police officers end up being commissioners or chief of police? I mean, we are seeing more of them. I remember there was one in DC, there was one in Baltimore when I was living there, but I don't know that it's necessarily the vast majority across the country where you find women in these leadership positions where they can make a difference. And even in talking to some of the journalists that I've been working with on this sexual harassment story, even though you're empowered to be the journalist, there's still sort of this fear that if that the story has to be perfect and and obviously facts have to be facts, but there's still sort of this fear that somewhere above you, somebody could still come after you, even with journalists who you see as sort of the saviors for some of these stories getting out into the press. So I think, and I know that you both deal with how you control the narrative, whether it's from a marketing advertising standpoint or whether you're doing it in court and you're defending a client and your client has to not sound crazy, has to sound very smart about what they're saying, but yet has gone through months or years of retaliation where they're told they don't know what they're talking about, they're overreacting, they're got poor judgment, right? I think we are more likely to hear those kinds of things about women because women, I think, the gaslighting, I think, gets to women more than it does to men. Maybe maybe I'm jumping to conclusions here, but I think the studies on the emotional abuse, the non-partner emotional abuse of adults, is that this is a tactic, and maybe because it's used quite a bit in domestic violence, where perpetrators gaslight their victims into thinking nobody else will love you, you can't go anywhere else, who else would want you? Corporations and governments, I think, do the same thing to victims. They try to convince them that it's just them not understanding the problem when the problem is bigger than them.
Yeah. Well, we have thousands of years behind us trying to claw our way up, And I remember early on in my career, like in the 80s, when I'd be wearing the big suits with the giant shoulders and I wore the man suits and stuff. And I was in them. And I mean, I remember so many times of walking into a room and it would be so many times I'd be the only woman. And I would walk in and everybody'd stop talking. Now, you know that they were making jokes, they were having fun man stuff, right? And I put a damper on the man stuff, and that wasn't fun to have me walk in there, And then a lot of times in the room, once I got in the room and everybody kind of got their bearings again, they would then play to me for my, so then they play to me and I was supposed to either approve or I was supposed to support different things. And it was a very difficult scenario to manage. And I think a lot of those scenarios still exist. And I have to say that one of my techniques for, dealing with them is I just walk in and I don't acknowledge them. They don't get any mind share. And they, and I come straight out. But I want to say one other thing, which is that we have a very thriving personal branding practice, and it's really focused on women. And we did that on purpose because we are advocates, right? So we said we want to help women get into the C-suite. We want to help them get on boards. We want them running companies, right? That's where we've got our issues of how far we're allowed to go up. So I cannot tell you how many times I have worked with a woman who is an outstanding, like amazing technologist, or comes from, like, I'm thinking of there's one who was an innovator in technology and could operates like the biggest autonomous car companies, etc., planning and getting everybody to work together on innovation stuff. Another had risen up the ranks as a high level CTO, chief technology officer, which is hard to do as a woman, very few. And when we worked with them and they came to us and they said, yes, I want either a board spot or I want a CEO spot, they didn't have the confidence, right? They were saying, like, I don't know, am I ready for it? Can I handle this? And when we would drill into who they were and what they've done, they were so incredible that all we really did was reflect back to them their incredible accomplishments and what they had and their capabilities, and organize those. And every time we did, they step it out. And both of the people that I'm mentioning right now went on. One did get her CEO role. The other person is heading up at one of the major technology companies. So, but it took reflecting back to them, their incredible careers, before they went, wait a second. Yeah, you're right. I am awesome. So we have to really do that, whether it's for ourselves or helping other women to understand that they are in the right place. They are completely adequate. And my daughter has this saying, and she says, and it is, oh Lord, just give me the power, the confidence of a middle-aged white man. And she uses that to spur herself on to other things, to take risks, to accept stuff that comes her way that a person would accept, but that a woman won't, because she's going like, wait, I need more training. Wait, I'm not ready yet. Don't let that stop you. Do not ever say that to yourself. Have that confidence.
I think one of the best things that I ever heard was a seminar on leadership, and there are a lot of books out there about leadership. You could learn how to lead, like Rudy Giuliani wrote the book called Leadership, but do we really want to emulate Rudy Giuliani or anybody else for that matter? We want to be who we are and lead in our own way, and I think that supports what you've just said about you have to find your own power. And I often say you own your narrative. Nobody else owns your narrative. Right. So own your narrative, find your own strength, learn what empowers you. It might not be the same thing for everybody on here. We all have our own sense of power. But I saw that Mary put in the chat that she has this deep sense of shame because she was the only female and would allow the locker room talk to continue. And I think that's also a hard balance, is like, how much of the boys' club do you stick your elbows in and sort of go along to get along? And how much of it do you when do you shut it down? And, when is a joke just a joke? And when do you have to, do what your niece did and, really put your foot down and say, this is inappropriate. You need to go or I'm out of here. And I think that's not always easy. I think we really struggle with those concepts.
I mean, I love what you just said, Jackie, because you pulled it right out of my head and said it in a very articulate way that, from my experience working for years in a professional setting with men and women, one thing that is just a fact, crystal clear to me, that women are cooperative and collaborative. That is very unique to women, and that is not necessarily valued in a leadership role, right? That's not, you just nailed it with the Rudy Giuliani. And we're not talking about the present day. I know you weren't. We're talking about the Rudy Giuliani who got stuff done, and he did. He got stuff done in New York. That old Rudy, but that was just one style of leadership. It was effective when he was a leader that made a difference. But that was just one style. There are so many different styles, just like you said, and even to maybe Mary's point, it's not in all of us to stand up and speak up in a crowd. And that's okay. That is okay. We don't all have to be the person who is standing up in every setting, and especially like in a locker room where you're the, lone female or a few females, that's not on you to change their behavior. That's not a responsibility that you have. And if you're the type of person who is outspoken and you can do that, great, fine. But it's not valued more than someone else who just doesn't want to have that kind of a role. And that's just not the kind of personality. Everyone is not the same. So we are not, I have 2 daughters and we are all so different. We would all take that locker room scenario and we would all behave differently. And that's okay. I wouldn't say like, well, you did it right and the 2 of us didn't. It's, we shouldn't have to be a certain kind of person, and you don't have to stand up in every circumstance. And one thing that I always say to my law partner, Eva, is I represent whistleblowers who have so much integrity and have a lot of guts. Like they really do have a lot of guts. And I'm not that person. I am good at representing them and standing up for them. But I am not that person in a workplace setting who is going to be the whistleblower. It's not in my nature, and I don't see myself doing it, but that's just not who I am. And that's okay. I don't have to be a whistleblower in every scenario. None of us have to do that. That is something that some people have the moxie to do. They want to do it, and that's something that they can do. But just because you're, so no shame, Mary. There's absolutely no shame. You've done nothing shameful, right? I mean, that's kind of one thing that we women have to sort of train ourselves. We feel so personally responsible for everything.
Yes.
In our
That's how gaslighting works.
Yeah, in our viewing, vicinity. And so, but we're not responsible for that. And it's okay if you don't have that kind of a personality who wants to stand up in a crowd and tell everybody off. That is okay. It really is. And there's no, and I'm not that person in every scenario either. And that's okay. I'm
Neither am I, actually. Surprise, surprise.
I'm comfortable with myself. There are times when I'm going to do it, and there are other times that I'm not, and I'm not going to be hard on myself about when I and I don't always want to do that. You don't have to be on all of the time and be like, we women, that's another exactly an example of what Mary is saying. It's like, well, we feel like we bear the burden. We're the ones who have to stand up in the crowd and say something. There are men who are going along with that in the locker room who probably know it's wrong, but they're going along too. I'm sure they're not walking home feeling shame.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and Paul, I haven't seen any questions in the chat, and I haven't seen any hands raised, but I did want to remind people that, we're open to inviting others into the discussion. And that if you do have something you wanted to say or a question that you wanted to ask, you can either do that through the chat, or if you want to have your mic or camera, we always try to make these roundtables a little more inclusive than like maybe a traditional webinar where the discussants talk and everybody else just listens. And so I just want to make sure everybody, was reminded that they're invited to join in. But I mean, it's okay if you're not feeling outspoken right now.
or if anybody has questions.
Okay, I knew Bali would get us started. Paul, can you open her mic?
The guest should be able to speak now and open their mic.
Okay, thank you.
Polly had her hand raised.
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great. Yeah. So thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting to hear from both of you, and it's great to have women like you in leadership positions, and also, of course, Jackie. But one question in my mind is how much of the positive changes that people are talking about are really only reflecting the experiences of kind of high socioeconomic status women, because, like Janine, I'm assuming you're getting hired by companies that want to, have equity And Renee, I'm assuming that the people that are filing these, is it Quitom or Ketom? I've never.
Either one is right. Everyone says
Yeah,
it.
those are big publicly traded companies. So these are maybe women that are kind of have pretty good jobs and can file these kind of complaints. And I'm kind of thinking, and like with Me Too, you know, the women that are pursuing lawsuits are people like Ashley Judd, who's a rich movie star who can afford to sue Harvey Weinstein. But so many women are in precarious work situations where they can't afford to hire an attorney. They're likely going to get fired if they complain about anything. And, you know, a lot of attorneys won't take cases for individual low-wage complainants. You know, maybe they'll take a case for like a class action lawsuit. And, you know, it can cost $100,000 to do a retaliation lawsuit if you're paying for your own attorney. So one thing that I don't feel like I'm hearing discussed enough is, you know, how much are things really changing for the women that are the most vulnerable, you know, at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder without the resources, you know, because the government agencies are kind of terrible. I mean, anybody can file an EEOC complaint, but good luck getting them to rule in your favor. It's like, you know, 3%, you know, finding for the complainant or something. So really what we need is like broader access to civil representation, like a right to counsel movement, you know, so that anybody who's got a valid retaliation case can get an attorney if they need one, in my opinion. So that's just my 2 cents, but yeah.
No, I think we would all agree with you on that. And I mean, that's why I started this by saying that the UN resolution on gender equity I thought was so important because it addresses exactly what you're talking about. Women at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale who do not have the resources, they don't have the legacy wealth, they don't have the power. I mean, like I've talked to Amazon whistleblowers who like worked in the warehouse and in those processing centers, and they get injured and they're not given any disability benefits, and they're trying to figure out how to get access to justice. And of course, a lot of them, English is not their first language, so they don't even understand all the rules and the laws and the things that they're being told, or the things that they're not being told that they should be told. So I think we do have a long way to go, Bali, in that regard. And we started, and I've been trying to get a campaign together on this idea of an office for the whistleblower for the Department of Justice. So not like another SEC program, but an actual office. It's hard when, so Paul says it's hard even when English is your first language. Yeah, because, you know, Renee, you know, legalese is its own language. But we've asked Senator Grassley, and we've done a sign-on letter of support trying to get an office of the whistleblower protection advocate that would do exactly what you're saying, because we need to rebalance the scales of justice so that women, minorities, you know, all the protected classes that don't normally have equal access to justice can find the resources and support to take these cases all the way through. And Renee, did you have more thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't doubt for 1 minute that what you're saying is backed up by the data, that women at lower socioeconomic levels are underrepresented legally. There's no question about that. But, you know, I will say under the False Claims Act, 60% of the whistleblowers who file are rank and file workers, not middle management. And we have a good number of our whistleblowers in successful cases are entry-level positions, people without college degrees, people who have a high school diploma. One of our best whistleblowers this year is a very young 30-year-old single mom at a very entry-level position, who is one of our, you know, going against the biggest company. So the False Claims Act really, you know, does represent people at every level. And by and large, it is the lower level folks, the rank and file, as the data shows, that are the whistleblowers. And under the False Claims Act, the representation is all contingency based. So there's no outlay of any cash for anything, expenses or attorney's fees by anybody who's a client of ours. It's a contingency based practice. So if we don't recover, then you don't pay anything and you don't have to put anything up front. So I of course, like I like preach the gospel of the False Claims Act, but I think and it's a Senator Grassley law. So we have Senator Grassley to thank for it, as Jackie knows. And it really does address a lot of these issues. Now, it is for the recovery of defrauded government programs. So it's not sweeping, right? It's not any kind of speaking up at your employer. It is for a specific kind of speaking up. So it definitely, to your point, Bali, it doesn't capture, it's not sweeping. So there are huge gaps. And your point is well taken, but the False Claims Act is sort of a different animal.
Yeah, and I think it has been different for other types of whistleblowers, like when it is about discrimination and harassment, and it's more a personal claim rather than a false claim about the corruption. And those cases that go before the EEOC, I mean, Bali's got the data probably about right where, and I wish Tanya was on here. So the fact that those cases, they're hard to win, hard to prove, hard to develop the evidence, hard to find an attorney, I think has been traditionally the problem with the EEOC.
Can I add a little something?
And Joy, I know. I just was going to say, Joy put something in the
and what I'm going to say actually is going to relate to what you said, Joy, because I think part of the problem, part of what we have to do is address women's sense of personal agency. And you just mentioned speaking English and there's other things that cause people not to feel powerful enough to speak out or confident enough in their own agency. So one of the things that I do is I like to work with some nonprofits. I particularly like teen women and early 20s. I really like to work with them because I want them to understand that they do have agency and that there is recourse, and it's not always legal. There's lots of ways to address whatever injustices come your way, and there's plenty to deal with in life. So I think part of what we need to do, there is the institutional side that you're talking about, like what's your recourse with institutions, but what's your recourse with businesses that treat you poorly or service that is denied, right? What do you do? And so we have to help people understand what they can do and understand that they do have voices and that they do have recourse. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
And Joy, I would call your attention to what Paul put in the comment before you.
Right.
It's hard, even when English is your first language, that these systems and processes are confusing, complex. It's why we always ask, do you have an attorney? Or have you even talked to an attorney? And I don't mean the attorney who handled your divorce, somebody who understands employment law, because these things are very hard to necessarily understand. And what is, especially when we're starting to talk about discrimination, harassment, bullying, those kinds of cases are a little different than and Joy, maybe a conversation with you and Renee later might not be a bad idea, because now I'm just off the top of my head, just because I know Joy's case. Renee, I think I'm going to connect you with her.
Okay.
And then, because I think there are some elements of these cases that do overlap into one area and another. Oh, and I see Jane. Yay. Hi, Jane. The trailblazer of female whistleblowers. She looks like are you in an airport? It looks crowded, but I think Lee has her.
Sorry, I'm such a Philistine. I don't know how to put my name up there. So no, I'm just listening avidly to everybody. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
You're the part of the tribe, maybe the matriarch of the tribe.
Yes, yes.
And you know, sometimes I like to say that we are whistle sisters, because I do think that sense of community is important, that we are part of a shared experience, that we might all have different cultural, ethnic, professional backgrounds, but this experience definitely brings us together and forms this sense of community. But I know, Bali, you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, I was just going to say regarding what Janine said about her daughter, I do think things are getting better, like with the young generation, you know, with, for example, men also speaking out when they see a woman being treated badly. So I think one thing will just change with leadership changes. Like if if every company had a CEO who really cared that everybody was being treated fairly, there wouldn't be a need for lawsuits and this kind of stuff, right? If everybody just did the right thing, we wouldn't need to resort to, litigation. So I am hopeful for the future in that sense. But, you read these terrible stories though about, what was her name? Lisa Bowman with United Way, and sexual harassment. So sometimes even very, well-off, high-profile women don't get a good result, So I think I'm hopeful, but there's still a lot of difficulties. And I think people sometimes don't realize, the difficulties that whistleblowers of any kind end up in, whether it's sexual harassment or some other kind of, legal or ethical violation that they're reporting. It's very difficult to be any kind of whistleblower still, unfortunately. But hopefully that will change with legislation and new leadership and variety of different things. Yeah.
So I know we have a few more minutes. So I just kind of thought maybe we would go around the table, because I always like to try to end with positive and encouraging things. So what do we do to stay sane? What keeps women in the fight? What keeps us young and healthy and beautiful? What keeps us going as women? What are some of the thoughts and skills? Janine, I know you have thoughts.
Well, I actually think that, that's where I was going to go, Mary. I was going to say, a lot of my early career development was because I joined women's groups, and we're now part of them. There's like one that we support as an organization called How Women Invest, and they only invest in women CEOs, but, and in women-led companies, I should say, and not token women-led companies, because there's those too. But so the point is, collaborate and find organizations that can help you with the skills, women's organizations that can help you with the skills. So that's what I would say. We're good at it. We like to help each other. There's a huge momentum there. And if you are doubting your skills and your capabilities, other women will help you recognize how, awesome and fabulous you really are.
Yeah, I totally echo what you just said, Jean, because ever since even before I was in college, I always attached myself to successful women. Always. And, my law professors who were women, the judge I clerked for who was a female judge. I went to law school because of the dean who was a female. And, I think it's really just being around successful women. And success doesn't have to mean financially successful, or I don't know what high ideals people have for what they mean by successful, but I don't necessarily mean what people maybe think I do. It's just women who are confident in themselves, happy with what they're doing, whatever role they have, whoever they are. They don't have to be famous, successful, or fabulously successful, but people who I wanted to emulate, and really just even in an observational way, just why is that woman happy? Why is she obviously happy with her life, her career? Why is she successful? And in part is just emulation and learning from other
Balance. I think
women.
you just touched on balance, life, work, career, fun,
Yeah.
relaxation, sports, hobbies. I mean, I think when I think about how we sort of create these strategies for our lives, I think that's a big part of it is finding that balance. I mean, I love that Mary went from one career to another, went from being a police officer to doing peer support. There's always something else inside of us that we may not see it right away. It's how do you bring that out? Yeah, and the like-minded men are out there too. There are a couple of men I know on this here today. I saw them log in, and not to take anything away from them, because they're a big part of what makes us successful too. I mean, it's having those teams. I think on the surface, Paul and I probably couldn't be any more different, and yet we found this good yin and yang in our relationship. We couldn't have this roundtable tonight if I didn't have him. I don't know, I always think of him like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain pulling all the levers and making everything work, because that's not what I do. So everybody needs sort of their own Wizard of Oz.
That's beautiful.
So just make sure you're giving other women opportunities. Make sure you're taking your own opportunities. When a woman becomes a CEO, she'll hire 6 times more women than a man CEO. So it's just about, stepping up, doing what you can, learning. Mary, we all learned. I was in sexual harassment situation, and I learned from it when in my career, right? And so I can't be mad at myself anymore because I didn't know back then. I let something go much as you did. So anyway, that let's just step in, step up, help others, and that's the way we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that I've spent a lot of time with military women, women in law enforcement. There's a couple of you on here tonight. Those are tough cultures. They're very male dominated. They're very white male dominated. I know we have, when we've got women, minorities, and last month we talked about whistleblowing while Black, that these are, I think we come and we have to understand our positions of strength, even when we feel like we don't have them.
Yeah. Because we do have them.
I think we're just stronger together. And so it's really just, for me, I'm happiest when I'm collaborating and, cooperating with more than myself, working with others, who, have better skill sets than I do, in certain areas, sort of making, working with others who complement you, and you complement them, because we all bring very different experiences and skill sets and levels of intelligence and creativity to whatever the task at hand is. And so to me, it's just strength in numbers, really.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so too. Be a whistle sister.
I like the whistle sister.
Yeah.
All right. Solidarity and whistle sisters.
Yes.
Yeah. So we will have this. Paul is again the Wizard of Oz over here. We'll have this ready and up and running and linked for us on our YouTube page. The best way to keep posted on these is to subscribe to our Eventbrite page. I don't know if Paul, if there's a link for following us, if there's a link. I know it's easy to get to a lot of this if you just go to our website, and you can figure out how to join our next. I got to look at a calendar. Our next roundtable will be on April 23rd, and I think we're going to be talking about crime victims, like how are whistleblowers crime victims and what are their crime victim rights? because I think very often we don't know it, and we don't treat these things like crimes. We let HR bully us into thinking that these are HR issues and not crime issues. So we're working on developing that roundtable. If you have ideas or suggestions for future roundtables, we try to set these up a little bit more in advance. Sometimes we're better than others, but we try to do them every month. And then we also have the announcement out. The Workplace Promise Institute will be September 12th and 13th in Washington, D.C. I'm waiting for a confirmation on the location. More to come. And we will keep answering your questions, making connections, and hopefully you enjoy and send us any feedback. We're always looking for how to make these better. So thank you. Go have dinner. Thank you for staying up late. Thank you for ending your day early, because and the reason we do these at this hour is I know it's getting to be about 8 o'clock at night in Washington, D.C., New York area, but for those of you on the West Coast, you've got to end your day early, and some of you are in the Midwest. You're all over the country, so I appreciate everybody joining from far and wide. So thank you, and we will see you next month.
Thank you for joining us,
Thanks. It was
everybody.
nice to meet everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.